So Hank Phillippi Ryan is the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. She has also won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 5 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. National book reviews have called Hank a master at crafting suspenseful mysteries and a superb and gifted storyteller. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple Magazine, and others. Her current book is The House Guest, a story of psychological manipulation that explores the dark heart of marriage and friendship. It's Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. The Library Journal Starred Reviews calls it a binge-worthy read. And her next book to watch out for is One Wrong Word, out in February 2024. So we have that to look forward to. Hank will be joined in conversation with local author Michael Wiley. So our interviewer Michael Wiley's new novel is The Long Way Out, featuring Frankie Dast, an exonerated ex-con who investigates a series of murders in Northeast Florida. Michael is also the author of 3 mystery and detective series, including the Seamus Award-winning Joe Kosmarski books, the Daniel Turner thrillers, and most recently, the Sam Kelson PI novels, which are currently in development for television. His short stories appear often in magazines and anthologies, including Best Mystery Stories of the Year 2022, and he teaches literature at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. So Michael, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Gabriella, and thank you to everybody else here from the library. As we were hearing before, the library is such a treasure. Thank you to our representatives from the Bookmark. If you hear, as you will, good things about Hank's new book, there are copies available for anybody who wants a personal one.
No pressure.
No pressure.
It's just my career.
There you go.
That's okay.
Yeah. You know, Hank is somebody who's really central to the crime writing community. I think we've known each other for well over 10 years at this point. There's nobody who's more supportive of other writers and of the field in general. You saw that with Terry Shepard here. There's nobody who has done more to shape certain parts of the field, especially suspense writing, and this is something that we'll talk about Hank's books as mysteries or suspense mysteries. Particularly, we'll turn, after talking a little bit about some writing issues, we'll talk about The House Guest, which is a wonderful story of power and manipulation, yes, gaslighting, Thelma Louise, all of these other kinds of things. It's a terrific, terrific book. But let's talk about you as a writer. We already heard, and I appreciated the whistle because that's what I do every time I read that statistic. Hank is she wears two big hats. As an investigative reporter with 37 Emmys, that's the one that makes me whistle each time. And then again, as an author of 14 novels, major award-winning, both from fan awards and industry awards, so people who are in the field and they know this as well. These are hard credentials to hit. Where do these two sides of you meet? Do you wear 2 hats at once? And if you do, does it get hot?
Are you thinking that I have a big head?
Yeah,
That's what it has
so.
to be.
I
2
think
hats.
so.
2 hats. The hats came kind of serially, and it's interesting. I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. And speaking of libraries, my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library to get books. We did, and we'd fill up the saddlebags with books and read up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house. And to your point, that's where I started reading Nancy Drew, as so many mystery authors did, especially women. And I, read The Clue. You read Nancy Drew, right? The Clue in the Old Clock and The Clue in the Diary, right? Which I thought was Clue in the Dairy for like the whole book. And I'm thinking, there should be cows. Anyway, so quickly, I know you asked a question. I read all the Nancy Drews, then I just hid in the hayloft for a month reading every single Sherlock Holmes short story and novella, every single one. And then I remember, and I think I was about 12, I remember reading Murder on the Orient Express. Do you remember? And if you haven't read it, just not right now, but when this is over, read that. Because I remember thinking, how did Agatha Christie do that? How did Agatha Christie do that? How did she write this, pull me into this gorgeous, twisty puzzle of a story? You read it. And then in the end, surprised me with this ending that was completely fair, a completely fair ending. And I wanted to do that. You know, I thought, wouldn't it be great to be a mystery author and be able to tell a story that would have readers turning the pages as fast as they possibly could? And then it crossed my mind, and here's finally your answer. Then it crossed my mind that it might be more fun to be Poirot than to write about Poirot. And after a long journey, which we can talk about if you like, I became a reporter. My first reporting job in 1970. My first television reporting job in 1975, if you can imagine. And I've been a television reporter ever since. But one day when I was 55, which was like 17 years ago, I had a good idea for a book. And when you have a good idea and you just think, this is gonna work. There's that thing, there's the feeling that you have. And I went to my husband and I said, sweetheart, I have a great idea. I'm going to write a novel. And Jonathan says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a book? And I remember this so clearly. I said, how hard can it be? I've read all these books. And of course, I soon learned, as you well know, how hard it could be. But that turned out to be Primetime, my first novel, which won the Agatha for Best First Mystery. And that was the beginning of my crime fiction career. So it took me, till I was 55, after I had won, had a wonderful career as an investigative reporter, and still am on the air in Boston. But it was just this passion of a thing that I'd always thought about doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. There's a lot of crime writers who publish their first books in their 40s or 50s. That's not at all unusual, and I'm not quite sure why it is. There are others. Michael Carita, there's a guy who published his first when he was 8. Yeah. I mean, not really. I mean, he was 19.
No, I think
he was 19. He was in college.
And he's a genius. I mean, there's Michael Carita I teach a class, many classes, but I teach a class in first pages. And I use his book, Those Who Wish Me Dead, as an example of this perfection of a first page.
Koryta. And I think he would be still better known if he had a name like Smith. Carita is hard to spell. But yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I wonder about that because do you know Catherine Hall Page, the author Catherine Hall Page? Yes, I see you're nodding. She has, she's written 25 series, the Faith Fairchild series. And she said to me once, and we got to be pals when I was brand new, and she said, I wish you had started writing when I started writing, when she was 25 or whatever. And then we could have come up together through the ranks, which was nice. But I said to her, I couldn't have. I'm not the person I am now as an author. I wasn't when I was 25. My life experience, my worldview, my emotions, whatever you get as your life expands and gets bigger and as your horizons get bigger and you have experiences. And then when the time is right, the universe says, now, you. And I completely believe that. And I think that's what happens to people as they have a desire and a passion. It's just not the right time. And you can't make it be the right time if it's not the right time.
No, I think that's right. Of course, two of your series, you have two series, the Charlotte McNally and the Jane Ryland, etc., series that feature protagonists who are reporters. Imagine that. Write what you know. How much of yourself is in these characters?
Oh my golly. I've spent however many years I've been an author telling people that I'm not Charlotte McNally, and I will just say, she is me, totally so. But the funny story, Charlotte McNally is a television reporter in Boston. She's smart, she's funny, she's neurotic and passionate and ambitious, and I like her because it's me. But she's not me. I mean, of course, I'm joking. She's totally not me. She's 46, first of all. Want me to tell you about why she's 46?
I do want to know why she's 46.
Okay, don't tell anybody. When I wrote the book first, I was writing about a television reporter in Boston a successful television reporter in Boston who was worried that she was getting too old for television and wondered what happened to a television reporter when she's married to her job in television and the camera doesn't love her anymore. Will she be a media old maid? So my agent read this and she loved it. She loved it. She said, oh, this is fabulous. I can sell this right away. I love primetime. I love Charlie McNally. And then she says, how old is she anyway? And I said, well, I made her my age. She's 55. And my agent says, oh, that's too old. I'm like, it's my age. So I said, but I was new, so you do what your agent says. And I said, well, how about 46? Can she be 46? And my agent says, 46 is good. So that's why Charlie McNally is 46. But the Jane Ryland series, Jane Ryland, also an investigative reporter in Boston, television, magazines, newspaper, keeps getting fired because she's so honorable that she won't do what her bosses say. And
like
she's
a PI.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, she won't break the rules. She's very, very honorable. She's very devoted. She's very ambitious, and she's very passionate about justice. So that's part of me as well. But Jane Ryland is not me. Jane Ryland is 33, and she is tough, and she answers back to people, and she doesn't try to make people like her, and it's a completely different series. The Charlotte McNally books are fun, lighthearted mysteries, sort of Nick and Nora Charles. And the Jane Ryland mysteries, I call them thrillers. They're investigative thrillers. And that was the beginning of my evolution into the standalones, which I write now.
You know, the relationship between writers and our protagonists is always a complicated one. And I'm interested in see if we can get a little bit closer into this, because you say she is you, but she isn't you. Maybe coming into this through a kind of a particular type of a thing. Have there been any news stories or any circumstances that have been in your experience that then have led either to the whole plot of a book or to a major part of a book? And how did you finesse that?
I mean, it's a really good question, because bottom line, my novels, whether they're the series or the standalones, are not my television stories made into fiction in any way. They're just not. But, you know, I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. I've changed laws in Massachusetts, had people sent to prison, got people's homes out of foreclosure. You know, how do I not put that life experience in my stories? You know, people write to me and say, it's so authentic, it feels so real, so genuine. Yeah, because the feeling of the thing, the system, the police, the justice system, the airline companies, whatever, you know, the foreclosure system, all of that knowledge. I mean, people say, how much research do you do for your books? And I say, I've been researching for 40 years. You know, I just didn't know it. So those stories are the underpinnings of the novels, but they're not the novels themselves.
No, that's really nice. You know, one of the things that I think very often people think, they say, well, you know, it's a writer, a fiction writer, just you sit down at the computer and it all comes from here. But as you're saying, you know, it either for us, you know, somebody like Hank, of course, has had a lifetime of research. Others, if you know, my investigative reporting. No, I've done none. You know, and so it means that, you know, we have to find out the information that we have to find out, and that's nice. Did you ever, you know, you're talking about some of the interesting circumstances that you've found yourself in on your way to becoming a reporter? Did you ever consider doing something that more was straightforward detective work?
No, you know, that's a great question. It never crossed my mind. I love the story. I love telling the story. I love having an idea for a story. I love tracking down the clues and following the leads. And then as a reporter, you get to take all this information. You know, I might shoot for a television story 20 hours of video for maybe 4 minutes on TV. So you distill it to what's the most powerful, what's the most meaningful, what's the most necessary, what's the most revealing, what's the most interesting, what's the most enlightening, what's the most educational. Then you get to write this story and then take the video into the edit room and make it into a little movie that then you get to show. and then something happens as a result of it. So on every level, it's the search, it's the production, it's the creativity, it's the communication, it's the message, and it's the change, and it's the justice that it brings. So, I don't think I'd be a good I'd be a good detective. We'd both be good detectives, wouldn't we? We could do it together.
Sure.
If this writing thing doesn't...
I'll be your sidekick.
You guys have any problems?
I'll be your sidekick.
I think I want to be the... Well, okay.
we can be each other's sidekicks.
Yeah. Anyway, you've seen our careers just take off right there. So, the thing about television and writing fiction, though, that is so similar, that you were sort of touching on, is that there is a thing that's a story. There's a rhythm of a story. There's an arc of a story. I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on TV, and I don't want you to be able to put my books down. So that's that same rhythm. It's the same pacing. It's the same need to keep the audience connected at every single moment. And then when you think about the similarities of television and fiction, you have a character who you care about, of necessity, character you care about, an important problem that must be solved or else everything bad will happen. You're tracking down clues and following leads and doing interviews and finding stuff out, and then in the end, the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them, and you get some justice and you change the world. So television reporting or writing crime fiction, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same, except for I get to make stuff up now. And that was, and this is my final thing, that was the one thing that I was worried about. After all those years in TV of only what someone said, only what the setting actually was, only what the facts were, only what the documents were, would I be able to sit at my little desk and look at the sugar maple tree outside in Boston and just make stuff up? And it turned out to be, incredible. The imagination.
Entirely. And of course, the question is the fiction truer or is the factual reporting truer? And, we can argue it, right? We can argue it. As long as we're calling fiction, fiction, and factual reporting, right?
It's so interesting because, writing novels, the characters say what I want them to say, or what I hope they say.
I hope they
do. In television, they just say what they say. I had a news director once who I wrote a script with the sound bites from the people. And she says, it would be really better if he said this. And I'm like, yeah, but he didn't say that. And she sort of, okay, right, you're right.
Yeah, people lose journalism careers for that one. Yeah. So you've pretty much very, very nicely, succinctly, and clearly covered what you can do in fiction that you should never do in journalism, which is make things up. Is there anything that you can do in journalism that you should never do in fiction? In other words, something in journalism that you just, again, you're talking about the structure of putting together the story in so many ways. It's like writing a story.
I do think that the thing that you can do in journalism that you have to do, and I've never thought about this, so thank you for a very hard question, that you can never do, that you have to do in journalism that you can never do in fiction is tell the answer first, tell the ending first. You have a headline that says 27 people accused of X, Y, and Z in the X, Y, and Z system of the thing, whatever it is. That was a wonderful headline. You would put, that's the lead, right? The lead is, here's the bad thing that happened. But and here's who's guilty, and here's who's, here's who's suspected of doing it, or here's where the money went, or here's what happened. And then you tell the story of how you find the thing, and then you end with that same thing. But in a book, in a novel, you start with the story question: where did the money go? Where did that family go? That kind of thing. So you start a book with a question, and you start an investigative story that's on the air, a completed story. You start a completed story with the answer.
Right.
See what I mean?
Yeah, real nice. That's clarifying. To a certain degree, does it? Again, not to throw a hard one after the hard one, but does it?
You promised me.
I promise. Okay, this will be the last
no
one.
No hard ones.
This will be the last one. The next one, I'll just we'll talk about the weather. Does it differ from, again? Some of Hank's books are thrillers, and some of the books are named as mysteries. And we often think of thrillers as, in some ways, maybe forefronting more of that bottom line. If not, say, 100 people died, 100 people will die, because there's a bomb that's buried someplace. In other words, so is there that difference?
Well, I think in a mystery, and I'm thinking of my own mysteries, in a mystery, something bad happens, and the investigator has to figure out who made that bad thing happen, and they are brought to justice. In a thriller, something bad could be happening, and the good guy needs to stop it before it happens.
Right.
So I think that's the major difference.
That's nice. Is there one or maybe multiple kind of things that you see as being essential to every novel of suspense that you write? That you say
Suspense.
Now. Thanks. Yeah. See, I knew. See, I throw an easy one and I get shot down. No. Is there something that it has to be accomplished, and then you say success?
Yes, something that has to be accomplished in a suspense novel. The reader has to superly and supremely care about what happens to the person to whom the book is happening. You have to I want to write a novel where you just cannot wait to find out what happens next. If you don't care as a reader about the character, why would you read the book? I mean, if you and I went to lunch and we're friends, and I say, listen to this, listen to what happened to me, and I leaned forward to tell you, and you would lean forward and say, what? And you don't have to know my entire background of what happened when I was a kid and what happened when I was 20 or whatever. You just want to know what happened right now. And why are you what is the story? And that's what I'm looking for in suspense. What is the story? And listen to me, I'm going to tell you about this, and you can't wait to hear it. And that's what The House Guest is too, and that is top of mind for me. When I'm writing, I have a yellow sticky on my computer that says, advance the story. And every time I think, what do I do now? Because I have no idea what comes next. I think, advance the story, advance the story. What does someone want? And how far will they go to get it?
Every
and that's the story.
scene has to be transactional, right? Now, based on what you just said, one might assume that you would answer this question in one way, but I think that you will almost certainly answer it in a different way. And then we can switch over to The House Guest. Plot, character, or setting, which is the one we need? It's the same. Good.
Yeah, it's how you can't have any of them without the other thing.
Okay, but here it is. You can save one, but the other ones go. Which one are you? Which one is?
Well, you have to have a character.
That's what I was thinking.
Who wants something? A character who wants something. So fine, it can be a character who wants something in one room, as has been done so successfully. It could be a character who wants something in an international thriller, or in space, or in some sort of a galaxy far away. I don't know. It could be. It's better. It's better if it matters where it is. But a character who wants something and will do anything to get it, because if they don't, their world will fall apart. That's what you have to have. Yeah, what do you think?
I entirely agree, and I think virtually every crime writer agrees as well. Probably most writers do, which is to say that we think so much of these as being exciting books, and we think of them in relationship to plot. But when you ask somebody, well, what keeps you returning to, say, a Jane Ryland book? Right. It's the character. It's not, I want to see what trouble she gets in. Well, I want to see what trouble she gets into.
And how she gets out of it.
And how she gets out of it.
With her wit and intelligence and smarts. And, and would you figure it out, too? Would you be able to figure it out? Would you be able to figure it out, too? I don't start with the character, though.
Interesting.
I start with the really cool, little gem of an idea of, what if this happened? What if there was somebody who X, Y, and Z? And then I ask myself, who would that be? And how would that affect them? How would that affect them? And how would that affect their world? And then the story sort of blossoms out of that.
Well, let's talk about the blossoming of The House Guest, which has, again, a really fascinating central character. And then we'll also talk about The House Guest, and we'll talk about some of the other figures in this. But tell us about Alyssa Westland, McCallan. Thank you. I wanted to get our other detective in there again. So yes, Alyssa Westland McCallan. Tell us about her as a character, because she's not a reporter. She's not a reporter,
right? She's not a reporter, and this was a big step for me. I was thinking back if I've ever had another book that does not have a reporter in it, and I don't think I ever have. So this just occurred to me 2 days ago. know that this is my only book about a not a reporter. So that's kind of interesting. And then don't forget to ask me where the idea for this book came from, because it's very specific. Sometimes they're not, but this one very.
That's next.
Oh, that's next. Good. That's number 27. Investigative reporters can read upside down very well.
I counted on that. You see what I just said about it? No.
Anyway, the house guest, Alyssa. I can tell you about the house guest quickly, and then I'll tell you about Alyssa, because it's all sort of a muchness. There was this thing on Twitter that said, can you describe your book in 5 words? I know, it's very difficult, because I thought, oh, sure. And then I thought, oh, I don't know. So the house guest is greed, divorce, betrayal, female empowerment, and revenge. Greed, divorce, betrayal, female empowerment, and revenge. Do you think it is?
Yes, and I would add a physical character too, of course, which is just the obvious.
Yeah.
Which is that she has a house guest.
She has a house guest. Well, that's the title, so it's a given.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
He's a problem. He's a troublemaker. It's like, So then on Facebook, just to expand on it a little, on Facebook where you get more characters. Are you all on Facebook? No? Twitter? Yeah. Yes. Instagram?
Threads.
Threads? Follow us on all of the above. Anyway, on Facebook, there was a thing that said, can you describe your book in 5 phrases? Because you get more words. So 5 phrases for the house guest are a gorgeous house on Cape Cod, a shocking and disturbing divorce, a strangely sympathetic FBI agent, a brand new best friend, and an emerald necklace. And that is the house guest. So the house guest stars, as you said, Alyssa McAllen, who, let me ask you, how many of you have ever in your life, you don't need to raise your hands, just nod, how many of you in your life have ever been heartbroken, had the rug pulled out from under you, had everything that you thought was true be absolutely not true, had to recover from something that was so shocking and so put you in such a state of disequilibrium, that you just didn't know what to do? And that's Alyssa McAllen when we meet her. She was happily married for 8 years, and one day, her husband of 8 years, the handsome, powerful, kind of manipulative Bill McAllen, walked out on her. And she's shocked and bereft and terrified and unhappy and baffled and every bad thing that you could possibly be. Your agent is calling you. Everything that you could possibly be. And it's worse because Bill has not only gone inexplicably, but seems to be wanting to ruin her life. He's taken all of their friends. She has no friends anymore. They all went with Bill. He's threatening to take away their house from her. He's threatening to take all the money from her. And then the FBI shows up at her door, and things are looking really bad. So Alyssa really needs a friend. And then she gets one. She meets this sort of beguiling, mysterious, seductive, needy Bree Lawrence, who seems to be, yeah, you read this? Oh, thank you. Bree Lawrence, who seems to be running from a dangerous man of her own. And the two become fast friends, as women sometimes do. They're in the same situation. And then Bree makes a suggestion that maybe they can solve each other's problems. And so that's why it is Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise and maybe meets Strangers on a Train. But remember that the author might be gaslighting you as well. So 2 smart women facing off in a high-stakes cat and mouse game, psychological cat and mouse game, to prove their truth about a devastating betrayal. But which woman is the cat and which woman is the mouse? And which woman is the house guest? Right. Yeah. And I think that's sort of my DNA of the book is cat and mouse.
Yeah. So why, you were about to head in this direction, why write about gaslighting now? What is it that makes this, I mean, in some ways I think we can all answer that, right? But why gaslighting at this moment in history, at this moment, why is this a pressing?
Yeah, and it's interesting because here's where it really came from. And every day in our lives, something happens that makes it be more and more timely. It's just unbelievable to me. But this started from a personal experience. A friend of mine in another lifetime was happily married, a smart, successful, worldly, professional woman, happily married, to a smart, worldly, professional, successful man, happily married for 8 years. Every morning they'd have breakfast together. And my friend would say, "Bye, honey, I'm going to work." And he'd say, "Have a great day at work. I'm going to the office too. See you at dinner." And this went on for years, 8-ish years, until the police showed up at their door and they arrested the husband. Turned out that he had never been to work a day in his life, that the job was completely pretend, that the whole thing was made up, that he had been fooling her this whole time, and actually, and my book is not about this part, he had actually been staying home and trafficking in child pornography on the computer, and that's not in the book. That will never be. But the thing about that intrigued me was that my friend did not know, just no idea what her husband was doing. And, we read these stories, the Madoffs and you name it. And the wife always says, "Oh, I had no idea. I just didn't know." And we think, "Oh, right, sister. You're not paying attention if you didn't know." But that experience, I know that my friend didn't know. And so then during the pandemic, my husband, this is sort of burbling in the background. This was a while ago. And during the pandemic, my husband, who's a criminal defense attorney, commandeered the breakfast room for his office, for his law office, because he stayed home. And I was in the study 2 rooms away, working. And it struck me that, I know what a lawyer does, and we talk about Jonathan's cases from time to time, but he's in there for 8 hours a day in the kitchen. And I don't know really what he's doing. And it crossed my mind, could he be keeping a secret from me?
He told me it's TikTok. It's all TikTok.
I don't know if he knows how to work the TikTok. Could he be doing something nefarious and I wouldn't know? Could he? He wasn't, but could he? And I thought, no. I would totally know. And then I thought, could I be keeping a secret from him? He thinks I'm in my study writing thrillers, but what am I really doing? He doesn't really come in there very much. Could I keep a secret from him? And I thought, sure. I definitely could. And whether that's true or not, it got me thinking, and that is the essence of the house guest. How well do we really know that person who's on the pillow next to us? How well do we really know the people who are the most important to us and that we trust and love the most? Could they be hiding something terrible from us? And that's what this book is.
And can I add a little bit? It's something that struck me that was equally powerful. That question about how well do we know the people who are sleeping on the pillow next to us? Absolutely. But also, and this comes very strongly through with Alyssa, how well do we know ourselves? Right? How much can we be confident of the things that we think we know when something shakes them, when the world no longer looks, and you do that beautifully.
Oh my golly, thank you. That is wonderful, that's wonderful, and I never thought about it that way. I've talked about empowerment, and the story is Alyssa's realization and her journey from beginning to ask herself, who am I if I'm not Mrs. Bill McCallum? Who am I as me? And can I do this? And the story is, it's a murder mystery, but it's a story of her realizing who she is on her own.
Right. One of the, I'm just going to quote one line from fairly late in the book, not a spoiler, but this in some ways captures especially Bill's relationship with Alyssa. This is described by a different character. There's physical danger and there's emotional danger. And one way to create emotional danger is to instill fear of physical danger. Every step you take, you wonder. Now I put in an ellipsis there because she wonders, various kinds of things. But, so it's all that mind play that's also tied very, very deeply to the physical and to the material circumstances. They live in a heck of a nice house.
They do. I loved making up that house. It's a beautiful house. Their house that they live in Boston and the house that they have on the Cape, they're both, I love to make up houses. It's so much fun. And it's interesting that you bring that up because, we always talk about writing the kind of book you love to read. That if you write the kind of book you love to read, then your readers will feel that passion and feel that love coming through on the pages. And I don't like graphic violence in books, so I just don't put it in mine. I don't like graphic sex in books, so I just don't put it in mine. I don't like inappropriate language in books, so I just don't put it in mine. But I do like mind games and deception and gaslighting and twists and those kind, a little bit of murder. But I think that the violence that people do to each other, the emotional violence that people do to each other, the psychological damage that people can cause to each other is often as devastating and destructive as physical violence. And then when the emotional violence, when the mind games make you think that at any moment of your life you are in mortal danger, and you're just walking on eggshells every single second, and you don't know what's true anymore, and you can't trust yourself anymore. How do you get that trust in yourself back? And that's what this is.
Nice. We only have a couple minutes, but let's turn, if we can, just briefly at least to some of the other characters. Bill is a fascinating character, and again, I don't think that there's anything that I'm spoiling here to say that in many respects, through much of the book, he's a phantom. He's felt as a force of danger, a force of emotional and physical danger, by his absence as much as anything. What is it, if you could pin your finger on it, that Alyssa fell in love with him initially? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, and I do think so. There's a couple of things about it. One, she was younger. She was in law school when she met him. She grew up in a very hardscrabble family, the kind of family where you're digging in the couch for the extra quarter, and the milk might be a little spoiled, and you just sort of grit your teeth through that. So and her mother was very critical and dismissive and demeaning of her. So she goes to law school to try to make the world be a better place, and she meets Bill McCallan, who is absolutely the opposite of everything that she ever grew up with an affluent family, with marvelous background, and he's a fundraiser for charities. That's what he does. He has a trust fund. They're very wealthy, but he still works, and he wouldn't have to, and he raises money for charity. And he's really handsome, and he's a good dancer, and he just totally sweeps her off her feet, and he loves her too. I mean, I think it's really important to know that this is not a gold digger Alyssa in any way. And this is not the man preying on the woman in any way. They are absolutely in love with each other. There's just something that he's not telling.
Yeah, he's manipulating. And by the time that we meet her, she has shrunk, hasn't she? She has shrunk. And so we learn that at one point she's looking at an heirloom mirror. She loved it because Bill loved it, right? And that in some ways, really summarizes who she is at this moment, at her weakest. She regains.
Well, I mean, he tells her, this house is for you. You decorate it for you. Mm-hmm. And then he tells her how to do it. And that's her life. I hear some chortles of the recognition there.
Well, before we're done, and I hope that somebody either raises this question, but in 3 words, because we need to get to the questions. 5 words. 5 words okay. Or 5 phrases. One Wrong Word is the next book coming out in February. Just a teaser.
One Wrong Word is about a crisis management expert called Arden Ward, who is accused of having an affair with a client. She did not, and she never would, but it's about how Arden Ward, a crisis management expert, has to manage this crisis of her own before her entire reputation is ruined and possibly her life.
Spoiler, another non-reporter. So.
Another non-reporter. I know, I'm on a roll.
Well, sorry to interrupt the flow of such a wonderful conversation, but we are going to open it up to audience questions at this stage. So For those of you that are here in person, you do have the clipboards on your chairs, so you can go ahead and write your questions down there. For those of you that are in our Zoom audience, you can go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A box. And so we have volunteers that'll go around and collect your questions and bring them up to me, and we'll give them to Michael to ask. And we will only be taking questions, written questions, to ensure that our Zoom audience can hear them online as well.
Easy, non-controversial questions.
Unlike Michael, I'm sure they won't hit you with the hard questions.
No, I love these questions, though. I mean, Michael is marvelous, isn't he? Wasn't a great interviewer. But
That's the first time in 4 years that somebody has said that. So no.
I can tell you while we're collecting the questions, sometimes people ask me if I've ever made a mistake in TV, because that's anathema. The one thing that you cannot do is make a mistake. And two mistakes. One is I was doing a story on radioactive isotopes and the security of radioactive isotopes, and there was cesium missing from one of the companies, and also another element missing from one of the companies, which was krypton that was missing, but I called it kryptonite in the story. That's what happens when your editor is not smarter than you are, and she didn't know. And this was before email, and I got so many phone calls from scientists saying, "You read too many Superman magazines, kryptonite." And then there was I was filling in Anchor on one weekend, and they said, they always say in television, just read what's on the prompter. If there is a prompter, you read that's on the prompter, because something might change that they might not be able to tell you, but they can put it on the prompter. So I'm reading the prompter, and my co-anchor says, at the end of the show, I was thinking how good I was. I'm not been natural. And at the end of the show, my co-anchor says, "That's all for this evening. I'm R.D. Saul." And I say, "Good night, everyone. I'm Kate Sullivan." Because that's what was on the prompter.
And you did your job right.
I did my job.
You didn't
right.
get fired. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And I just burst out laughing on live TV. I'm like, no, I'm really not.
I've made worse mistakes in books, but this is not the time to tell those ones. We'll have that conversation. Have you ever written a book where the good guy loses and the bad guy gets away with it?
No. I mean, that's such a great question, because you saw me think about it. Because one of the things about books is sort of what's good and bad.
Yes.
What's good and bad. I have written books where I will tell you that in every one of my novels, it is finished. At the end of it, you know what happened, you know who did it, you know what happened, you know why, especially why, and you can have an idea of what will happen next. The books are finished. They're done. Even in the series, each individual book has a plot that's completed. I do think that one of the reasons I love writing thrillers and mysteries is I want that justice. If it's emotional justice, if it's legal justice, if it's psychological justice, it doesn't always have to be in a courtroom, the justice. It just has to be that the scales are back in balance, and that's what I'm going for.
Raymond Chandler, famous PI writer, wrote a list of the things that every detective novel has to do, and that was one of them. Is that the good guy has to come out. It might not be regular jail or something like that, but some kind of justice. I will say, keep our eyes open as we read The House Guest, because I think that there are some characters who are morally ambiguous, who things are working out. It works out, and all of the characters.
Because people. One of the keys of a novel is motivation, isn't it? Why does someone do what they do? And there are reasons that people have, and that's what I try to make really clear. Even with the people that are gray, you understand why they're doing what they're doing.
What is your writing routine? How long does it take you to write a book?
My writing routine is fear, procrastination, followed by bursts of energy. I try to write every day. I do. You're keeping 100,000 words and a big idea in your head the whole time, and I think you have to sort of tend to that. And I think that the muse only comes when you're working. And so when I sit down at my desk and this is ridiculous, but I try to write 1,000 words a day. I don't always succeed, but I know that if I write 1,000 words a day by a month before my deadline, then I'll be finished with my book. And then if I make that goal, I have a chart. I actually have a chart. If I make that goal, then I don't have to worry. That's this free-floating anxiety about, will I be done? I know right where I am on my writing program. So I try to. My goal of writing every day is I sit at my computer, I do my 1,000 words, I look at the words that I did before, and when I finish my 1,000 words a day, I come out to my husband and I say, I did my words, yay, I'm good. And the key of that is that by not saying I have to write a whole book, I'm just going to write 1,000 words a day, I let myself succeed every day. I set myself up to succeed. And that success fuels the writing for the next day. Even if it's a bad writing day, I say, I can do this, I can do this.
And 3 months later, you have 100,000 words, right? So this question really, to a certain degree, you are.
Although it takes me really 10 months.
Well, 10 months, but for the first draft.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right. So do you review every sentence when writing a novel or story?
Oh, dozens and dozens of times. Every sentence is completely pulled apart. I read it out loud to myself. I have the AI voice on my Word read the book out loud to me. I think about it all the time. I go through and look for all the words that I can take out. That editing process is my favorite part. It's the whole ball game. Is when you that delete key I love. I forgot what even the question was. Yes, of course. I look at every word, not every sentence, every word. I say, why is this here? Why is this sentence here? Why is this word here? Why is this paragraph here? Why is this scene here? Do I really need this? What work does it do? I ask every time.
So if a draft is anywhere from a major rewrite to just some of that tinkering, how many drafts roughly?
Well, it's hard to say, but I know that my first draft will be 120,000 words. And I just think that's fine because I don't have an outline. I don't know. I'm just going to write this. And then that's why I give myself an extra month to cut 40,000. Well, they're usually 95,000 words, my books, and they start out being 120,000 words. So you can see that's not just surgery. That's chopping.
That's most of us, right? Everything that Hank is saying, every word of what you've said, other than the 1,000-word limit, I write when I can. In the mornings, and every day until it's done.
Why do you think? What do you think about that everyday thing?
Because it's never fully out of my head. So part of it is that we are living that plot also, right? Is that for you?
Yeah, I'll be at dinner and just be gone, and my husband will say, "You're in the book, aren't you?" Yeah, I'm in the book.
Yes, I am, and I just killed you. Right.
So he's a lawyer. He's my in-house counsel.
Right. You don't want to kill him.
No.
He's the last one to go. So again, to a certain degree, I think you're pointing at an answer for this. We talk in writing about two ends of a spectrum. One is writing by the seat of our pants. Those are called pantsers. And we don't know what the next word will be when we write the first word. And then the other one is a very serious outline. So the question is, your plots are intricate. Do you plan outline it all or not?
Not at all. Not one bit. And I would love to have an outline. Do you have outlines?
I do not.
Wouldn't you?
No. But I do know. I know where it's eventually headed, which is in a sense what you're talking about too.
Yeah. Sometimes I can picture the last frame of video in the novel. Where will it end? Do you know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
But how I'm going to get there and who's going to populate that world, I really have no idea. And so that's what sort of gets me to the computer every day. Is I think, oh, I can't wait to see what happens, and then I think, well, then you better write it because you can't know what happens until you write it. And I mean, people say. The twists in these books, the twist in The House Guest, the ending of The House Guest, you really surprised me. And I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? I mean, who'd have thought that would happen? I surprise myself every day, and I love that. I embrace that. Sue Grafton used to call that the magic of writing, that something just blossoms. And that's why I write. It really is why I write.
Well, to go to your point, some people say write the book you really want to write, but you are already suggesting write the book you really want to read, the kind of book that you want to read. And part of the pleasure in writing is it's a readerly pleasure too. It's like, wow, this is how the story is going.
And I'll tell you this, when you I know I'm finished when I have a deadline, and on that at 6:00 that day I'm done. But there's a moment in the story where I'm doing those edits that you all were talking about and rereading. And there's a moment in every book, knock on wood, where I forget that I wrote it. And I'm just reading this manuscript. And are you a writer? Because you're really nodding. Just reading this manuscript. And then I think, oh, I guess I'm done. I guess I'm done. And always, always at that moment, sort of my eyes well up, because this is this big ending of a thing that I've worked on for so long.
Commercial break. Not a question, a comment. My sisters were with you at a luncheon at the Raleigh BoucherCon, and the BoucherCon is the big, major, national, international mystery writing convention. At the Raleigh BoucherCon, and the lights kept going out. They said you were very funny and a calming presence. Back to the show, right?
That's so nice. Thank you. That was scary.
Yeah, that's always weird. It's always weird. So excuse me. I don't want to skip over questions, but some of them are kind of repeating a little bit of what we were looking at already. And so there was one: how long does it take to draft? How many rounds of edits? Can you talk about stumbling blocks? Do you have a writing routine? Any more that you want to add on that?
I do think stumbling blocks. When I teach a lot of classes, as you do, and people say, "Oh, this is so hard," and I think, yeah, it's really hard. If it's not difficult, I don't think you're working hard enough on it. I always say, if you get a little stuck, pat yourself on the back, because you're a writer. And on my bad writing days, I just say, yep. I mean, there are days that I think, this is the worst thing that anybody has ever written in the history of the universe. It's terrible. And then I think, yep, but you're just going to go on, aren't you? You're just going to go write another bad sentence and another bad sentence. And you're going to do your words, and you can fix it later. You can always fix it. You can fix it later, but you can't fix what's not there.
It's the old line that Hemingway either did or didn't say: write drunk and edit sober, right? So get it out there, and then you've got 12 drafts to go through before you're ready to go.
But that's the fun part.
That's the fun part. Yep. In your opinion, what makes for the best antagonists in a mystery story?
The best antagonists are fascinating, compelling. You kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing, and what they want and what they need, and how their psychology brought them to that they could make an argument, and you could make the argument for them that what they're doing, we understand it. I mean, I think that's Bill. Mm-hmm. He thinks it's right. He thinks he's doing a really good thing. We talk about this 1,000 times. The bad guy doesn't wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to be really bad today. They think, I'm going to win. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to get what I want. And that's the essence of a book, too, getting what you want. What do you think?
Entirely. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing: is any super bad antagonist, anybody who is somebody who we're going to care about, there must also be something that's compelling in usually a positive way, right? So whether the person is redeeming or just so fascinatingly Hannibal Lecter, the eyes sear into you. There has to be something that makes us want to not lose.
And he was doing something good as well as something bad.
Right.
That's the thing.
Right. No, that's nice. Another kind of a structural question: how do you build a satisfying red herring that still connects to the actual climax or twist?
I don't know. When you, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I don't think about it that way, because I think in real life, things happen and we see things and hear things, and they don't mean anything to us at the time. And later they might. Or later you think, oh, that's why the dog wasn't there. Or, oh, that's why the mail didn't come. Or, oh, that's who knocked at the door. So Lee Child says this, and I think this is great. Lee Child says that the beginning of the book, it's like one of those cooking shows where they give you a refrigerator full of stuff, and then they say, make something out of this. Cook something beautiful, delicious, and fabulous out of what we just gave you. And he talks about how, like, for the first 100 pages of the book, he's just filling up his refrigerator with stuff. clues and things. You don't call them clues. Well, I don't when I'm writing. I just call them things that happen. You're just filling up your refrigerator with things that happen. And then later, as the rhythm of the story moves to the end, you think, how can I take those things that I had in my refrigerator and put them together to make them mean something? There's a test, there's a psychological test. Do you know what is it the Miller analogies test, where you have to say why this thing is like this thing and how these things are connected? Do you know about this? And they give you a box of things that are just disparate things. And they say, find two things in this box that are similar and tell me why. And you take, I'm making this up, but like a glove and a sock. Why are those the same? How are they connected? So when my mother took the test, she says she looks at her watch and she said, they're all connected. And the doctor says, what? And she says, they're all in the test. Is that so great? And that's how I feel about the book. That's how I feel about the books. All that stuff, it's all in the test. Now the key is how I can take those things and braid them together in the end. And the key of the red herring, though, is if it feels like it's going to mean something in the book, and my readers are smart, your readers are smart, we're going to pick up on the, wait a minute, why are they mentioning fish throughout? This is going to be a thing. You have to explain it at the end. You can't leave a red herring hanging. You can't have them say, well, who did call? Or who did send that telegram? Or who did, puncture the tire? It has to be, wasn't that so silly? It was the garage guy. Or, oh, you know what? I forgot it was Memorial Day and there's no mail. It's got to, something that someone worries about, and that's what a red herring sort of is. I wonder if this is that. I wonder if it's a message from him. If it's not meaningful in the story, your responsibility, my responsibility as an author, is to explain it to the reader, to leave no loose ends in the story at all. My goal at the end is to have everything tied up, whether it was relevant to the plot or whether it was relevant to the person's life. You have to understand it.
It seems to me in some ways, when we think of a red herring, it has that name partly because it's a cliche, it's a convention, and Hank's writing is sufficiently complex that it doesn't traffic in that kind of a red herring. That global idea of everything is in the test makes more sense to me, because every character who plays any kind of a significant part here, to go back to a phrase that Hank used before, wants something. And to a certain degree, all of those desires are interrelated, right? And so if everybody wants something and they're all interrelated, that means any one of them and anybody in the story could be responsible, and only time will tell, right? As the story plays out. And so it's not so much a red herring as a whole, school of fish. But it works well.
As you say, nice.
Yeah, there you go, nice. How do you come up with the names of your characters?
All I do is try to make sure that they don't all begin with C or M. Somehow I just gravitate to. Do you have
I change names of characters. I'm writing one right now where I have a character named Kelson. He's a detective, and then one of the major characters is Kelly. And I was like, I can't do that.
I know. I had. There's a housekeeper. I know we're going to get timed out. There's a housekeeper and the house guest whose name now is Tammy Barker, which was a name that someone won in an auction. But anyway, Tammy Barker's name in the beginning initially in the book was Jane Barker. And there's another character whose name is Roshandra Jain, Jain. And I think I worked on this book for 4 months before I realized that I had Jane and Jane. And I thought, of all the names in the world, why are these names the same? And this book, the main character of this book is Alyssa. And in One Wrong Word, her name is Arden. And my final thing about this, you'll note in this book that there's Alyssa and Bree and Colin and Des. And that's because when I was describing what I thought about this book to my agent, and I didn't know what their names were, I just called them character A, character B, character C. And so then when I wrote the book, I just kept them that way.
Do we have time for a final? Okay, we are out. Will you please join me in a big round of applause?